Okay. Great to see. Great to have so many people here from so many different backgrounds. All right. So I guess we will officially get started here, and if other folks are coming in, they will join us. First, thanks everybody for coming out tonight and well, joining us here on Zoom for this program. My name is Jeff O'Handley. I'm the program director for the Otsego County Conservation Association. And again, welcome to the Hemlock Woolly Adelgid information session, part of a sort of a two-part program that will involve a training as well for volunteers who wish to get out and survey for hemlocks. I'm very pleased to see so many people, and as I said, such a wide variety of attendees, village officials, lake property owners, biologists, all kinds of people interested in learning about hemlocks, with concern about hemlocks, and we're hoping to see that concern about the hemlocks translate into some positive action. I will start out ahead of time by thanking our presenter, Carrie Marshner, as well as other members of the New York State Hemlock Initiative for helping us out, both being here to lead this session as well as leading the training session on Saturday. Carrie, your expertise and experience in dealing with this is going to be a big help to us and has been so far, and I'm sure we will be pestering you with many, many questions in the coming weeks and months, and hopefully you won't get sick of us. I'm also going to acknowledge Matt Albright and the folks over at the SUNY Biological Field Station for their expertise and help in getting some of this organized. I don't think Matt is here tonight, but thanks. And also to the village of Cooperstown for your interest and also for providing us access to Ferry Spring Park. Hopefully there won't be too much snow to move this weekend so that we can park up there. There's that. Just tonight's program is co-sponsored by OCCA and the Clark Foundation's Mohican Farm. The quick rundown on OCCA, we're a private nonprofit organization founded in 1968 by a group of citizens who were primarily concerned with sustainable forestry issues. Over the last 50 plus years, we've branched out into pretty much all areas of the environment, including solid waste, water quality, planning, and of course, invasive species, something that we've been very involved with for a number of years. And as I always like to tell everybody, education is part of everything we do. I think it's very important to have an informed public. So that's part of why we're here today. I'll also introduce Devin Merkley from Mohican Farm. Devin.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you to everyone else who's participating tonight. It's energizing to see this many numbers stepping in the right direction here. Yeah, I work for the Clark Foundation and more specifically Mohican Farm. And similar to Jeff's rundown of the OCCA, I'll give you a quick rundown of the Clark Foundation and what it's all about. In Cooperstown, the foundation provides assistance to a variety of nonprofit, educational, community, and environmental organizations, and supports major cultural institutions such as the Fenimore Art Museum, the Farmers Museum, and the Baseball Hall of Fame. The foundation also supports significant operating programs, including the Cooperstown Beautification Program, the Clark Sports Center, and Mohican Farm. And like I said, Mohican Farm is where I enter the conversation. That is where I work. And our mission is to promote broad-based sustainable practices throughout the Clark Foundation itself, the village of Cooperstown, and surrounding region in cooperation with like-minded institutions and organizations such as the Otsego County Conservation Association and the Hemlock Initiative. So thank you for everybody that's put in this much work. I think this is our starting point though, so looking forward to it.
Thank you, Devin. Just a couple of quick housekeeping notes. I don't think you can unmute yourselves actually, so we will remain muted unless we have a need to change that later on. I don't think so though. If you have questions, use the Q&A button to ask, and you can feel free to ask questions at any time. I believe, however, what we will do is kind of hold the questions until a couple of different points in the presentation, and we'll go through and answer them. And we are recording this, and we will make it available at our YouTube channel. And then after Carrie's presentation, we'll talk a little bit about what's happening on the weekend. So stick around for that. So let me just see. I am going to stop the share at this point and turn things over to Carrie. Again, very grateful to have Carrie here. Carrie Marshner is an invasive species extension associate at Cornell University. She has been with New York State Hemlock Initiative since 2015, where she coordinates the Hemlock Initiative's outreach efforts, works with partners to facilitate conservation planning, and assists with program management. Carrie, the screen is yours.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay? Thanks for the introduction, and I'm really happy to be here talking with you all today. Not so happy that it's because you guys found HWA this winter, but at least you know it's there. I'm just going to tell you about why hemlock trees are important to start with, since I'm not sure where everybody stands on their knowledge base around hemlock ecology. Hemlock trees are what we call a foundation species. They fill a unique niche. They're our only shade-adapted evergreen tree, except for cedars, I guess. So they're the evergreens that you're going to see down in our gorges, our lakeside gorges, in valleys, sometimes on north-facing slopes. That's where we usually see hemlocks in our region. They're specially adapted so that their needles can photosynthesize even with just the little sun flecks that come in through a canopy. And that's why they hold their needles a little farther down than some of the other evergreens that you see. They are food and habitat for a lot of different plants and animals. If you walk into a hemlock grove in the summertime, you'll notice that it feels cooler than the surrounding forest. The air under that hemlock canopy is 10 degrees centigrade cooler than the air above it. So they do a really great job of creating a cooler refuge in the summer. If you do the same thing in the winter, as I'm hoping many of us will on Saturday, you'll notice that it feels a little warmer under the hemlock because it blocks the wind, because again of the lower canopy and the evergreen nature of the tree. I've also heard that this is sometimes called the ever-feeding tree because it has these gently drooping boughs. And as the snowpack builds up, more of those boughs get caught in the snow and pulled down to where animals can feed on them all winter long. Just found that out last year. It was kind of exciting. Not only do these trees support our terrestrial systems, they also really help out with our aquatic systems, which is a little counterintuitive. But if you think about evergreens, they're mostly pulling up water out of the ground to photosynthesize and do their things in the spring and the fall when we have lots of water. And they're kind of inactive in the summertime when the deciduous trees, the broadleaf trees, are photosynthesizing and pulling water very actively, and we're often in drought. And so having those hemlocks on the landscape helps stabilize stream flows and keeps them from being so responsive to flood events. They also help filter nutrients out of the water as they flow through the ground to the water system. And they help keep cold water cold. So if you guys have any trout bearing streams in your area, you might want to hang on to the hemlocks there, because actually our native brook trout is another name for it. One of the more old-fashioned names was hemlock trout. And they did a study in the Delaware Water Gap around the turn of this most recent century, where they found up to 3 times as many brook trout in watersheds that had hemlock versus the broadleaf ones. They have that really deep shade, and they help the snow stays a little bit longer under those evergreen trees to bring cold freshwater recharge into the streams later into the spring. So they're super important for both our terrestrial and our aquatic systems. About 76% of our forests in New York are in private hands. And so everybody here is really important because you can survey, but also if you're a property owner, what you do on your property really matters. Most of our forests are in private hands. Hemlocks are about the 3rd most common species in New York, which, coming from the Finger Lakes region, down here where you see it's kind of a light green on this map, I was a little surprised, but you guys have quite a lot of hemlock down in your area, and there's a ton of it up in the southern Adirondacks. Some of these forests are up to 60% hemlock. Same thing here in the southwestern Tug Hill region, and a lot in the southern tier, and of course the Catskills. What we don't want is for those forests to look like this. This is Pisgah National Forest. The southern states have had HWA move through much more quickly than we're experiencing up here in the north. For instance, the Great Smoky Mountain National Park is working very hard to conserve just 1% of their hemlocks. And we just don't want to see this landscape of those trees in our forests here in New York. Does anybody have any questions so far? I'm going to move on to our pest, which is Hemlock Woolly Adelgid. To take a step back and put this in a global context, these are all the places where hemlocks grow naturally. We've got 2 species out here, the eastern and the Carolina hemlock, a couple in the western US, and then several more in Asia. And all of these have native Hemlock Woolly Adelgid, where the pest has been there for thousands of years, and there are predators that are adapted to eat it. Trees are a little bit more used to this kind of a pest. We just happen to be the lucky ones on the East Coast that never had a pest like this. So our trees are not adapted to a piercing, sucking insect, and our ecosystems just don't have any predators for these pests. This is how HWA moved through New York. It arrived down here in the 1980s, and everything that is this light pink was infested before the turn of the century. And then these orangish ones were the first decade. The lighter red is the teens, and these darker red ones are all 2020 and 2021, with just a couple from this year. There's been a lot of spread in these northern and western areas in the last 2 years. This is what HWA looks like. It's these white woolly bundles that you're seeing on hemlock twigs, usually on the underside of the twig at the base of the needles. These guys right here. So that's what you'll be looking for on your lands or when you're surveying, trying to help out in the Cooperstown area. This is what HWA looks like if you peel off all the wool and you look at it under a really big microscope. These pores are where it produces its wool, And this crazy child straw looking thing is its mouth parts. That's what it puts down into the tree to take starches from the tree. And it's not the feeding that actually kills the tree. It's the way that the tree walls off all of the damage from that insertion of the feeding tube, which is not such a big deal if it's just one HWA. But if you have this many HWA, it gets really hard to get sap out to the end of the twig. And that's where HWA grows its new needles. They come out at the ends here every June. And so once the tree can't get sap out there, it can't make new foliage, and eventually the tree starves to death. And that's what kills our trees. In the South, trees are going down in about 4 to 10 years. Here in New York, so far, we've been seeing mortality that's more like 6 to 20 years, because every time we have a nice cold winter like this one, it knocks the HWA populations back and our trees get a little breathing room. But those cold winters hardly ever actually knock out an HWA population, and I'm going to tell you why. HWA has 2 generations in a year. They lay one set of eggs in the early summer, and then they estivate. They go into like a suspended animation for the summer as their very smallest phase. And then in the fall, they wake up and grow to maturity and then start laying eggs about mid-March. And those mid-March eggs grow right away with no dormant period. And they lay eggs in the late spring, early summer. And that's this generation again. So 2 generations a year, the overwintering generation and the spring generation. This is what the crawlers look like. They are super, super small, and they're the only part of the HWA life cycle that can actually move to a new location. Once these guys find a likely spot and they put that mouth part down into the twig, they can't do it again. And so if you dislodge them after that, they just die. Once they do find a place and put their mouth part in, that's called settling. Once they settle on twigs, then in the summertime, they go into this estivating, suspended animation, dormant stage during the summer, probably to avoid predation. And this is what they look like. You can see this is really magnified. They're these little tiny poppy seed-like things with the white halos. And that's what it looks like when it's not as magnified. You can see that it would be a little hard to find them at this time of year. They're there. Then they wake up in the fall, start feeding and growing, and they start making this wool, which we believe they're using to protect themselves from desiccation and from cold temperatures in the winter. And this is much easier to see than that little tiny estivating settled nymph. So that's why we suggest that people get out and survey in the winter, actually from late fall into winter, through the winter into early spring. But late fall is hunting season, so mostly people aren't out wandering around in the woods unless they're hunting. Each adult will lay 50 to 100 eggs. So you've got this, I already showed you this. So you've got asexual reproduction. Did I mention that? They're all females on our part of the US. So any one individual who survives a cold snap or who arrives on the leg of a bird can start a new infestation or blows in on the wind. Then they have 2 generations for a year, with 50 to 100 eggs each. So 2 chances for exponential reproduction and no predators on this coast. And that's why we're seeing these huge populations that are killing our hemlock trees all up and down the East Coast, because we've got all 3 of those factors working together to create this perfect storm of exponential growth. So what do you do if you have HWA on your property or in your township, there are really two options for management. There's chemical management, and in the long term, there's biological management. Let's talk about chemical management first, because that is the current option. There are two chemicals that work. One of them is imidacloprid, which is slow acting, but once it starts working, about a year after you apply it to the tree, it continues to protect your tree for up to 7 years. And then there's dinotefuran, which works right away. Within a few weeks of application, it is killing the HWA in your tree's canopy, but it only lasts for a year. Imidacloprid is widely available as a soil drench for ornamental use, although I did just get an email that said that that might be changing next year. Dinotefuran is only certified applicators can apply. We really think that this application method is the best management practice. Oops, I thought I had some extra words there. This is basil bark application, where a certified applicator comes out with a backpack sprayer and applies the chemical to the first 6 feet or so of a tree. And then the chemical coat soaks in through the bark and then is moved up as the plant is pulling water up from its roots. It's transported up into the canopy. We like this because it's very specific. If you use a soil drench, it works, but any plant that has roots in that area that you applied soil drench is going to pick up this chemical versus it only going into the hemlock tree. Imidacloprid is a neonicotinoid. This is the largest class of insecticides in use across the globe. The vast majority of them are used on agricultural seeds. The reason they're so popular is that they are not toxic to mammals, as opposed to the organophosphates, which were incredibly toxic to mammals, and the imidacloprids replaced them. Neonicotinoids are a risk for our pollinators, and that's why we're seeing legislation in New York to restrict its use in the state, which is probably a good thing because we're really struggling with our pollinators. The reason we're willing to suggest its use in this context is that hemlock trees are wind pollinated. So they don't produce any nectar. Bees do not visit them. Their pollen is not of interest to bees or other pollinators. So if you're going to apply these chemicals in the landscape, this is one of the safest places to do it. And you only have to apply them once every several years, which is great. When you're thinking about the pros and cons of treating, you have to remember that it's not either I treat or nothing happens. HWA is really killing almost all the trees it infests. So if you do not manage your hemlocks, you will not have hemlocks within 10 years or so, maybe 15, maybe 20. So if you think back to the first part of the talk and all of the ecological benefits that the hemlocks as a foundation species provide to our forests, it's really critical that they stay in the environment. And right now, this is our only option for that. And so when you're weighing those risks, you're weighing the potential risks of the treatment versus the risks associated with losing that foundation species. In the long term, the solution for this is going to have to be biological control because it works indefinitely into the future. It works across the landscape scale, which we could never do with chemical treatment. It's too expensive and would be crazy. But we're still figuring it out. Biological control is appropriately a very highly managed research field. You have to do a lot of research before you can release your insects. And you also have to do a lot of research to figure out whether this is going to work in a new environment or not. Usually the clock for a successful biological control research program is about 20 years. So we're going to be working on it for a while. Everybody but me in my lab is working on research for biological control. I get to talk to people instead. But we're hoping we can come up with a solution long-term to save our hemlocks. But to save the trees that are on the landscape now, those need to be treated by you guys, because we're not going to get this out in the landscape in time to save them.
Carrie, I'm going to break in for a moment if I can. And we did have a question which was from Peter about approximately how much does it cost to have spraying or, treatment on the trees?
That's a great question. So there are actually two limitations. One of them is cost. It's not as bad as EAB. It's about $1 per diameter inch for the imidacloprid alone. It's more like $2.50 or $3 per diameter inch if you do the two of them together. If you treat early before your trees are sick, you can just use the imidacloprid because they can handle another year of damage before the chemical kicks in. And that's one of the reasons that we really encourage people to treat early. Does that answer? Oh, the other limitation is that you can only treat about 180 diameter inches per acre. There doesn't appear to be any regulation about how you draw your acres, but 180 inches isn't that much. And so it almost always takes a few years to get through to all of your trees. The upside is that spreads out the cost over several years. The downside is you have to pay attention to it for several years. Does that make sense?
I think so. And we did have another question that just came in from Cindy Falk, that Massachusetts has been recommending professionally applied horticultural oils, and is that an option? And I can vaguely remember hearing people talking about that when I was younger and living on Long Island, like some kind of oils. So
if you're talking about a hemlock hedge, something that's low and manicured and in an ornamental landscape, a horticultural oil will work. You have to apply it multiple times in a season, and you have to make sure that it covers all the whole tree, all the twigs on the tree. And that's why it's not a great option when you're talking about a forest landscape, because most of the foliage is up 50, 60, 70 feet where you're never going to get that horticultural oil. And if you have to go out several times a year to do it, it would just be prohibitively expensive. Does that make sense? But if you're talking about a landscape tree, yes, horticultural oil is an option. I guess I was thinking about forest trees.
Okay. Thank you.
And Carrie, where would somebody start to reach out if they wanted to reach out to somebody that is a certified pesticide applicator? Is that a call to the DEC? In the rural areas, we don't have a booming plant health care industry. So I'm wondering where you direct people for that first phone call. Thanks.
So we have a list of applicators. That's about 5 years old. We emailed everybody in the state who had the right applicator license and said, do you want to be added on, do you want to be on our list for pesticide applications for this pest? And we got some answers and we put it into a spreadsheet, and we're happy to share the ones for your region. They just need to email me.
Awesome, thank you.
Mm-hmm. You can also just talk to the arborists around you and find someone. So the predators, HWA predator insects that we're working with, we have two different kinds. The Laricobius beetles, they're from the Pacific Northwest. We mostly get them from Oregon and Washington and occasionally BC. We've released a bunch of them and we've had establishment at 7 sites in New York, which is great. They're all 6A growing zone or warmer. And these guys only attack that winter generation. For the last 5 years or so, we've also been working with these silver flies. Leucopus recently changed, the name changed recently to Leucotoraxis about a month ago. They are also from the Pacific Northwest, but these guys eat the eggs of that spring generation of HWA. We've released a bunch of them. It's a lot harder to find fly larvae when you're looking for establishment out there in the forest. And so we're working on an eDNA, environmental DNA sampling method to detect whether or not we established these or not. And hopefully we will be able to tell you more soon. This is where we've released so far in New York. This is probably the closest to you guys. What we need for a biological control research site is protected land, so that we know the trees aren't going to be cut down. We did release on a hemlock hedge in the Catskills, and we went back to check it the next year, and they'd cut the hedge down. So we don't do that. We don't generally release on private land unless it's a very, very special situation. So protected lands, healthy trees, big HWA populations, and branches low enough that we can reach them so that we can do research to see if if they're establishing and how yeah. So we need low branches, healthy trees, high HWA levels, and protected land. So keep that in mind. If you find that out there in your landscape, let us know, because we don't have any release sites near you. So looking for HWA, this is you guys. I wanted to share that this Lake George infestation, which is now huge, was actually not found by us, by DEC, by the APIP PRISM, by the Adirondack Park Association. It was found by a camper from Brooklyn who said, "That's weird. There's HWA in my campsite. I have that in my yard in Brooklyn. I didn't think it was up here. Let me just report that." And that's how we got wind of this infestation that we've discovered is 250 acres and growing. So it's really important to have people out there looking at trees wherever they go. This is your region. Here you guys are. You can see there's a lot of HWA in the Catskills. There's been a few points down here. And then there was one point here until last year, and then it's finally made its way up to you guys. This area, we've been looking and looking, and we haven't seen anything yet. And this is you guys a little closer. All of these sites were surveyed 2021 mostly, and then these are the finds from this past fall, thanks to Devin. So if you're a landowner, make sure you find your hemlocks and survey them regularly for HWA so that you can get that early treatment out. Because what you don't want is for your trees to get really sick, and then you're paying for the tank mix, right? That's $3 per diameter inch. You're going to save a lot fewer trees if that happens. And then please do treat. If you are the person that I saw has 30 acres plus of hemlocks, you're certainly not going to treat them all. You're going to have to pick and choose. And if you want some help picking and choosing, because you want to think through which trees are most ecologically important on your property and how do you weigh that versus hazard trees versus other issues, we actually built a tool for that. It's on our website. It's called the Landowner Prioritization Tool. You can download it and take a look. And if you have questions, please feel free to reach out to me anytime. If you're a community member who wants to help in the larger landscape, you can do this by yourself, or you can do it as part of a team. Go out into an area with hemlock trees and look for HWA and report what you find. The best way to report is into IMAP invasives. That is what New York uses for tracking invasive species infestations in New York. All the different invasive species. Spotted lanternfly is on there. HWA is on there, water chestnut's on there. It's all in there. It's actually a super interesting map to look at. But if you report there, then all the land managers around you get that alert. Hey, there's HWA in my area. It's really important. And so if you could please do that, that would be awesome. Or you can tell Devin or tell somebody else from this team that is forming in your area that you found it, and they can report it. When you go out into the landscape, what these guys are doing is they're taking that twig and they're flipping it over and looking at the underside of the twig for HWA, which again is on the twig at the base of the needle. You're looking for those white woolly bundles. If you see stuff that's on the needles, it's not HWA because they're on the twigs. And they've got this sort of woolly look to them. If you see something that's very smooth and large and maybe not right perfectly on the twig, you may be looking at a spider egg sac, but feel free to go ahead and take a photo and email it to us and we'll let you know. Or submit it to IMAP and either we or another expert, often Jason Denham at DEC, will look at it and we'll let you know if it's HWA or not. It's good to wear dark colored gloves because that gives you a nice contrast with the white woolly mass that you're looking for. Final thoughts are you really can't rely on winter temperatures because as the weather is changing into the future, what we are seeing is fewer cold winter nights. A little hard to believe this month, but it is true that we're getting fewer of them. And also HWA is adapting at the northern end of its range to survive colder and colder temperatures. So the winter temperatures are not going to save us in New York. It's really critical to survey so we know where this pest is, and so that land managers know when they should be on the lookout for it. And treatments are going to be critical to save the trees that are on the landscape now. And the long-term solution, at least one big piece of the long-term solution puzzle is going to be biocontrol. And we're working on it as hard as we can. And we hope to have something that will work to save our hemlocks in New York. So thank you very much. We have a bunch of information about treatment, identification, survey, volunteer programs. Hopefully anything you need to know HWA is at this website address. We're on social media. And if you email this email address, it'll go to me and it'll go to a couple other people in the Hemlock Initiative. So somebody should be able to answer your question. And that is the end of my presentation. And I hope it all made sense. And I'd be happy to answer any questions, or we can roll right into talking about Saturday.
It definitely made a lot of sense. Thank you so much, Carrie. We do have a current question about what category pesticide license is required to apply those chemicals.
I believe it's the two, the forest one. Category 2.
Category 2.
Category 2, yeah.
Okay. And I actually did have a question that came to mind. If you're a landowner and you are picking and choosing your trees to save this one and not those, is there a recommendation? What do you do with the trees that you are sacrificing, so to speak, or letting go?
That's a great question. We don't have an answer yet, but Brian Ellis at DEC, I just saw a talk. He is working on recommendations for climate-friendly forestry practices and what trees can you plant that are going to survive for the next 50 years, and which ones grow the fastest to capture the most carbon. And I think that there's going to be a really good synergy between the resources that he's developing and this pending holes in our landscape that are setting us back.
Right.
So,
yeah. Because I was going to say, I know that for example, when chestnut blight hit, it was cut down the chestnut trees, and I know when emerald ash borer was coming through, a lot of people just said to cut them down while there's still value or before they die. And, you know, if you're looking at some trees that you're going to treat and other trees that are going to be infested, they will potentially be a source to continue spreading that. So, you know, is there?
Yeah, you could cut them. We don't recommend cutting trees
Right.
as management for this because they tend to be infested up in the canopy where you can't see it. So once it's arrived, you could cut down that one infested tree, but it's probably all through the rest of the. Hemlock's not a super high value lumber. The nice thing about HWA is because it's a piercing sucking insect, it doesn't damage the wood.
Right. And
hemlock is very rot resistant. So you have lots of time. You don't have to worry about hurrying to cut it down. Yeah, you can probably harvest anytime in the next 10, 15 years.
Right.
But you might talk to the local Amish mills because they do use hemlock for building barns and stuff. So there is an emerging market for hemlock wood. Does that help?
Yep, absolutely. Thank you. Another incoming question from Lisa. I have read that young red spruce are shade tolerant. How about planting them under hemlocks now?
I don't know.
Okay. That's a check with Brian Ellis, maybe.
Check with Brian Ellis. That's a great idea. I know our spruce in New York have been having a lot of weird mortality issues for the last 10 years. And they seem to be increasing. So I'm not sure if that would be a great choice. What about cedar? Cedar's down in a lot of those swampy areas. You know, that could be another refuge creating tree.
And actually, I did have another question that came to mind, and that is a lot of the damage comes from the tree itself, sort of, I guess, walling off the. So if you do treat a tree that has an infestation in it, you know, kind of knocks it, do those branches ever recover? Is there any chance that any of those branches recover, or they're gone?
It's another good reason to treat them early, especially if it's a tree that you know, it's between you and the lake that you're going to look at. Treat it early, because if there's light damage, the branches are still alive and it can work around it. But if you wait until the whole lower canopy is gone, that's not going to come back probably in our lifetimes.
Okay.
We do occasionally see new, attempts at new growth, but it's a great question.
Okay. Anybody else? Any other questions out there?
I'm going back a few months to a visit to Lake George with Mark Whitmore, and I think I remember him saying this could have been early in the findings, but that some of the treated trees, the surrounding trees, had uptake of the pesticide through root grafting. So that I'm not sure if you can confirm or deny something like that, but that might be something to keep in mind for not cutting every last tree that you haven't treated. I think they're getting some residual treatment next with neighboring trees or clumps of. Maybe you can confirm or deny that.
I've heard anecdotal evidence for that. Haven't seen a research paper on it. But hemlocks do root graft, and so there's the logic seems sound. Yeah.
Okay. Good. And it doesn't seem like there are other questions at the moment, but maybe something will pop. Oh, wait. Does the tree die from the top down or bottom up?
They die from the bottom up. And in fact, one of the things you can look for when you walk through woods, especially in areas that have had HWA for a while, is places where your hemlocks kind of look like lollipops. We call them lollipop trees. That's actually a pretty classic sign of a long-standing HWA infestation. Everything's dead except this tiny little tuft at the top.
Okay. that I know that somebody who is on the call tonight talked to me earlier about trees that died. I think she said 6 feet or so up or something, although I was wondering if that might be deer browse or something too. But another question that came in, and I think you alluded to them. Are you interested in a small privately owned hemlock grove, about 19 trees on less than a quarter acre, to experiment with the biological controls?
I wish I could say yes, but we're not releasing on private land unless it's protected in some way. And we would probably prefer something that was part of a forest matrix. We had an idea about hemlock hedges for a while. We were going to release on hedges around the state. It just did not work out. And what we found was that we had better success when we're releasing into trees, into woods that have a lot of young regeneration that we can reach. That seems to work better for us.
Okay. And in terms of protection for those, would you consider, I guess, privately owned land that has, conservation easements or protection through one of the land trusts,
Yes,
for example?
Okay.
Okay.
I think we would consider that. Okay. I have yet to see my boss go for something that's just in a forest management plan.
Right.
That would be a much weaker form of protection, but.
Okay.
No.
Okay. New question comes in. Are there other trees that are susceptible besides hemlocks? I have 4 blue spruce on the other side of the yard that are also bad from the bottom up.
No, this Adelgid only attacks hemlock. Unless you're in Asia, in which case they go after a particular species of Asian spruce, but we've never seen them attack a spruce in the US. And they don't. That's why we have no sexual reproduction, because they need that Asian spruce to produce males. So we just get the asexual reproduction. We don't ever see this on other species. There are other woolly adelgids. There's a pine bark adelgid, there's a larch adelgid. And so you might see adelgids on other species, but they're probably a different adelgid.
They look similar.
They can. Balsam woolly adelgid is becoming kind of a problem up in the Adirondacks. It's been here for a while, and it seems like it's moving into a more invasive stage. Pine bark adelgid is not a problem. It's a native. That one's native. Mm-hmm. And so, it just hangs out on the trees and it hardly ever hurts them. It usually gets knocked back by a predator. If you take a sample, you'll see a bunch of flies and stuff eating the adelgids.
Okay. New question: can we replace eastern hemlocks with resistant western ones?
They just don't like our climate. They don't grow well here.
Okay.
There are some researchers who are working on the resistance end. They're looking for bulletproof stands, stands that have been infested and didn't die. Mm-hmm. Not because they're in an insane frost pocket, but because they're just not dying. Then there have been a few publications on that, but so far we haven't really seen that take off. It's still in the exploratory phase. But again, that would be finding those, breeding them up, and planting a new forest, like we are with ash, mm-hmm. not ash, elm and chestnut. And it would be great if we could figure out how to save them before we reach that point.
Right. Okay. And then an observation, I'm watering the inside plants of my next door neighbor. They have some small cacti that has the same looking woolly critters attached to the indoor plant.
Outside my area of expertise, but I know there's something called the whitefly, and there are some aphids that are white and woolly. And in fact, as long as we're talking about this, there's the beach aphids that are called the boogie woogie aphids. When you disturb them, they wave their butts around and you see these dancing little, you should totally look them up. They're awesome.
Interesting. I know we've gotten a couple of calls every so often from people saying, I have these, they look like woolly adelgids that they're flying around or something. And I don't know what they are. Somebody had sent me a picture of one once and it was too big and it was, I think I figured out what it was, but I don't remember now. But I know there's a couple of things that turn up out there that are sort of odd. And what types of invasives are likely to establish in areas of hemlock devastation?
What species or what invasives? I'm sorry.
I think what invasives are likely to come in where hemlocks are dying off.
Whatever's nearby. Seriously, because it's a disturbed area, and that's part of why we want people to be actively managing.
Right.
One of the really scary things that Brian Ellis showed was a map of where forest regeneration might not even happen naturally anymore, because there's enough pressure on them from climate and from invasives that you might just get a trashy shrub pit and never get a forest again without active management. And so I would really encourage you all, if you have hemlocks and you're going to let some of them go, to really put some time and thought into how you're going to actively manage that to keep it healthy, resilient forest.
Right. Okay. And I know certainly around here, well, probably everywhere where hemlocks are too, there's also the issues that go along with erosion if you're losing your hemlocks. And those of us up in the Cooperstown area know that along the east side of the lake, certainly it kind of supports the road or protects the road. So yeah, there's a lot of potential impacts.
So slopes are interesting because they're maybe really important to treat, but they're also more expensive because the applicators have to rope in to do it.
Right.
You can do it, but you have to account for that in your budget.
Okay. I don't see any other questions. So I think we say thank you so much, Carrie, and really enjoyed your talk. And I know there's hope for the future. So we'll keep that up. And I guess we can talk. I know a number of people are planning on being part of the training on, we believe it's going to be Saturday. We are still trying to work some details on this. Let me just go back to sharing my screen here.
While you're doing that, can I just say that it's really helpful to get out there with somebody who can answer your questions about, is this a spider egg or is this HWA? So I encourage everybody to try to get out this weekend. Yes.
And absolutely. So the current plan right now is that on Saturday, we're planning for Saturday, Steve Kinney, who is a volunteer with gosh, what is it? Central New York Hemlock Hunters, and this is part of the Hemlock Initiative.
He's one of our volunteers.
Yep, will be out and working with us to show us, how to identify the Adelgid in the field, and how to conduct surveys. We have 2 sessions that are set up. One is from 10 to approximately 11:30, and a second is from 1 to 2:30. And I know we have folks signed up for both sessions, which is great. Right now, we're going to we're expecting some tough weather over the weekend, and it's possible that we will postpone until Sunday, where it's not supposed to be quite so bitterly cold. We're going to make a decision tomorrow, so everybody who is pre-registered, please look for an email from me letting you know what we're going to do. If we have to go to Sunday, it would be the same times, 10 to 11:30 and 1 to 2:30. Hope it doesn't interrupt with services or football or anything like that. And if you haven't signed up yet and you're interested, if you see that link at the bottom, you go to occcainfo.org. That is our web calendar there. Go to the site there, and on the calendar, when you get to the drop down, just choose a time. Okay. And as I said, we'll be sending out an email. It is going to be either day. It's going to be cold, so dress appropriately because we do not have indoor space for this, and we'll be the entire time outside. Steve had recommended to us, as far as any equipment to bring, he says if you have a ski pole with a little basket on it, use that, you bring that because it's useful for helping to pull branches down to be able to inspect for the hemlock. We do ask people to have face coverings, both for COVID and because it's going to be cold. You'll probably want something on your face anyway. And let me just make sure to say once again that it's going to be cold, so dress appropriately. Devin and I are still working on some of the details of once we have people trained how and where we want you to go. We'll fix that pretty soon. But again, I ask if anybody has any particular questions about any of this, please let us know. Devin, you have anything to add or?
Thank you to Carrie, and thank you to you. We're working at a pretty fast pace here so that we can get people surveying before that window closes. In March is when it's before we can accidentally spread the bugs when they're in the crawling stage. So we're working at a breakneck pace here, and that's why we may not have all the details of assembling teams yet, but we're working on it as fast as we can.
Right.
So.
And I'll also mention, Carrie had mentioned IMAP invasives, which some people here may be familiar with. My board president is actually a certified IMAP instructor. I don't think I got certified, so I can't officially do it just yet. And I think that we will also plan on doing an IMAP training in the very near future to get people familiar with that as well. It is definitely a really useful tool, and contributing to the information out there helps everybody. So look for that too. We'll keep you posted.
Thanks very much to everyone who's here for caring about hemlock conservation and for being interested in the local forests. And we're really grateful that you guys are interested.
Yeah, thank you. All right.
Thank you.
So I guess one more minute. If anybody has any last questions or comments, please add them to Q&A or the chat. But otherwise, thank you all very much. Thank you, Carrie. We will see some of you on Saturday or Sunday, but we'll be in touch with you, as I said, by tomorrow afternoon with the nailed down time and day. Oh, where did somebody raise a hand? Where do we? I see that. Yes, Christine raised her hand. Sorry, I'm losing my controls here.
Can she talk? I didn't think.
She may not be able to.
I might be able to let her talk if I can. All right. I am okay.
Christina, unmute and ask your question now.
Yep.
You can.
I'm trying. I gave her permission, so I don't know.
Did you give her permission to unmute?
I did. Oh, technology difficulties.
Well, there's always the chat box.
Yep. Okay, here we go. Okay. Barbara asks, when again is the best time to have our trees treated? Prior to spring?
So the best time is probably the spring, and the second best time is the fall. They're both pretty good times. You want to be treating when the trees are actively, moving moisture through their trunk so that they translocate. So they move the chemical up into the canopy. So spring is great because the trees are really active then, and fall's pretty good because they're active then as well. You want to do it. It's on the label. The ground should be moist so that they can get moisture, not frozen and wet enough that there's moisture to get. I've seen treatments as early as maybe April, and I've seen them into early June. I am not an applicator, so
Right.
that's not a real answer. That's a guess answer.
Okay. Barbara says thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, and I guess maybe that was an accidental hand raise there. So,
Okay.
all right. So I guess that will be it. And again, we'll get the video up as well if people want to go back and revisit anything. And thank you all so much for coming out. Stay warm.
Thank you for organizing.
Welcome. Thank you.
Have a good time out there.
Yes, thanks. All right.
Bye.
And we will end now.
Alrighty.
Okay, let me also. Yep. Okay, well, thanks everybody. Good night and look for the video.
Thanks, Jeff.
Yep, thank you, Devin. And there we go.